As Marcy and her father prepared to leave the cozy inn the next morning, Oliver approached them with a melancholic look in his eyes. His kind smile and gentle demeanor had made them feel at ease during their stay. Marcy found herself wondering if they would ever cross paths again. "I'm sorry to see you go so soon," Oliver said, interrupting her thoughts. "I enjoyed our conversation last night." "We did too," Marcy's father replied warmly. "Thank you for your company and your insights. It was refreshing to talk to someone so knowledgeable." Oliver's eyes sparkled with pleasure. "It was my pleasure. Safe travels to you both." As they walked out of the inn, Marcy glanced back at Oliver, feeling a twinge of regret that they wouldn't be traveling together any longer. But she knew that they had to continue on their own journey. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft golden glow across the sleepy town. The air was crisp and cool, and the birds were singing their morning songs. Marcy's father led the way down the quiet main street, the sound of their footsteps echoing on the cobblestone road. As they made their way towards the outskirts of town, Marcy couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. They were alone now, with no companions to rely on if anything went wrong. Suddenly, a group of travelers appeared on the road ahead of them. Marcy's father tensed, his hand instinctively reaching for his sword hilt. But the travelers didn't seem hostile. In fact, they greeted Marcy and her father warmly and offered to share their cart for a short distance. Marcy's father hesitated for a moment, eyeing the strangers warily. But they seemed harmless enough, and the thought of a ride, even a short one, was tempting. "Thank you," he said finally. "We would appreciate the help." The travelers beamed at them, and Marcy felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this journey would turn out to be more interesting than she had initially thought. As they rode along, Marcy's father struck up a conversation with the travelers. "So, where are you all headed?" he asked, trying to sound friendly but also keeping a watchful eye on their surroundings. "We're heading to the market town of Fairfield," said the traveler driving the cart, a middle-aged man with a bushy beard and twinkling eyes. "We've got some goods to sell there, and then we'll be on our way home." Marcy's father nodded, making a mental note of the information. "And what about you?" he asked the other travelers. The woman sitting across from Marcy smiled. "We're just passing through on our way to visit family in the next town over. It's been a long journey so far, but we're almost there." Marcy listened with interest, wondering what it would be like to travel for such a long time. She had always been a bit of a homebody, preferring the comforts of home to the unknowns of the road. The travelers continued to chat amicably, swapping stories and sharing news from their respective towns. Marcy found herself joining in, telling the group about her and her father's journey and the sights they had seen so far. As they rode along, Marcy felt herself relaxing for the first time since they had left the inn. The travelers seemed friendly and trustworthy, and she felt a sense of camaraderie with them despite their differences. Perhaps this journey wouldn't be so bad after all. But as they traveled further and further from town, Marcy began to notice that the travelers were growing increasingly quiet and guarded. They exchanged furtive glances when they thought Marcy and her father weren't looking, and their hands hovered near the weapons at their sides. Marcy's unease returned in full force. She glanced at her father, who was watching the travelers with a look of deep suspicion. They had made a mistake, she realized. They had trusted these strangers too quickly. Just as Marcy was about to suggest that they get off the cart and continue on foot, the travelers abruptly announced that they had to part ways. Marcy's father frowned, clearly sensing that something was amiss. "What's going on?" he asked. The travelers hesitated, their eyes flickering nervously. Finally, one of them spoke up. "We've got some business to attend to," he said vaguely. "We can't take you any further." Marcy's father narrowed his eyes. "What kind of business?" The travelers shifted uncomfortably. "It's none of your concern," the first traveler said curtly. Marcy's father stood up, his hand on his sword hilt. "I think it is my concern. We were under the impression that we were traveling together. Now you're abandoning us in the middle of nowhere." The travelers exchanged another look, and Marcy saw fear flicker across their faces. She realized then that they were hiding something that they didn't want her and her father to know. Just as the situation seemed to be escalating into violence, the travelers relented. They explained that they had overheard Marcy and her father talking about their journey the previous night, and they had believed that the two of them were carrying a valuable treasure. "We thought we could rob you," the first traveler admitted, shamefaced. "But now we see that we were mistaken. You're just ordinary travelers like us." Marcy's father sheathed his sword. "We're glad that you realized that before it was too late. But we won't be traveling with you any further." The travelers nodded, shamefaced. "We understand," the first traveler said. "We're sorry for any trouble we caused you." As Marcy and her father got off the cart, they felt a sense of relief mixed with trepidation. The travelers had been friendly enough, but the encounter had reminded them of the dangers of the road. They watched warily as the travelers disappeared down the dusty path, leaving them alone once again. But as they turned to continue on their journey, they heard the sound of hooves approaching from behind. Marcy's father spun around, his hand on his sword hilt. A group of riders, armed and menacing, had appeared out of nowhere. "Hand over your valuables," the leader of the group demanded, his voice cold and threatening. Marcy's heart raced as she watched the scene unfold. She had never seen her father draw his sword in anger before, but she could tell from his tense posture that he was ready to fight. Before the bandits could make a move, a figure stepped out of the shadows, his face obscured by a hood. "You should leave these travelers alone," the hooded figure said in a low, steady voice. The bandits hesitated, eyeing the figure warily. But then, with a sudden burst of violence, they lunged forward. Marcy's father drew his sword, ready to meet them head-on. The hooded figure moved with incredible speed and agility, taking down bandits left and right with quick, precise strikes. Marcy could barely keep up with the blur of movement as the figure darted in and out of the shadows. But just when it seemed like they might be victorious, the bandits regrouped and attacked with renewed ferocity. Marcy's father stumbled, his sword arm weakened by fatigue. The hooded figure was grappling with two bandits at once, his back exposed to the others. It seemed like they were about to be overwhelmed when suddenly, the hooded figure let out a fierce battle cry and charged forward with a renewed vigor. With lightning-fast strikes, he took down the remaining bandits one by one, until they lay defeated on the ground. As the dust settled, the hooded figure approached Marcy and her father. With a swift motion, he removed his hood, revealing a face Marcy recognized. It was Oliver, the innkeeper they had met the day before. "I had a feeling those bandits might try something," Oliver said with a wry smile. "I'm glad I was able to help." Marcy's father couldn't stop thanking the mysterious warrior who had saved their lives. They quickly set up camp for the night and retreated to their tent, exhausted and shaken from the encounter. As they sat inside the tent, Marcy's father took a deep breath and looked at Oliver with a sense of curiosity. You mentioned earlier that you are a philosopher, yet you fought like a seasoned warrior. Who are you really? He asked, his voice low and serious. Oliver looked at him for a moment, as if weighing his options. Then he let out a sigh and spoke. I am Oliver, a philosopher by trade, but also a protector of the kingdom. I have been tracking a group of bandits who have been preying on travelers along this road for weeks now. Marcy's father looked at him, his eyes wide with surprise. And you thought we were their targets? He asked. Oliver nodded. I did. I've been keeping an eye on you since you arrived at the inn. I had a feeling they might be after you. Why would they be after us? Marcy asked, her voice shaking with fear. Oliver hesitated for a moment, as if deciding whether or not to reveal more information. Then he spoke. There have been rumors of a valuable treasure hidden somewhere in this area, he said. The bandits are after it, and they will stop at nothing to find it. Marcy's father nodded, his expression grave. We have nothing of value, he said. Oliver looked at him for a moment, as if studying him. Then he spoke again. You might not think so, but sometimes the most valuable things are the intangible ones, he said cryptically before getting up and leaving the tent. Marcy and her father looked at each other, confused and uncertain about what was to come next. But one thing was clear, they were no longer alone on the road, and their journey had just become a lot more complicated.